Why everything changes after paying off your debt. Nobody warns you about what happens after you spend months, maybe years, focused on one goal: pay it off, clear the balance, get to zero, and then one day, you actually do it. The last payment goes through, the account shows zero, and you sit there thinking, okay, now what? Most people expect relief, and the relief is real, but what comes after that, what actually shifts in your life, is something the personal finance world almost never talks about, because paying off debt isn't just a financial event. It changes how you think, how you decide, and what feels possible. That's what this is about. Let's start with the money, because that part is concrete. When you're carrying debt, credit cards, student loans, a car payment, some combination of all three, a significant portion of your income is already spoken for before you make a single decision. It's not yours to allocate, it belongs to the past, to things you already bought, already borrowed, already spent. Think about what that actually means in practice. Say your total monthly debt payments are $900. That's $900 every month that cannot go into savings, cannot go into investments, cannot go toward anything that builds, it just services what already exists. Now here's the number most people never calculate. If you took that same $900 a month and invested it consistently at an 8% average annual return, the rough historical average of a basic index fund, you'd have around $165,000 after 10 years. After 20 years, that number is over $530,000. That's not what you're building toward while you're in debt, that's what you're delaying. And on top of the lost investment opportunity, there's the interest itself. Depending on your debt load and your rates, you might be paying $200, $400, sometimes $600 a month in pure interest, money that goes to a lender and never comes back. It doesn't reduce your balance meaningfully, it doesn't buy you anything, it's just gone. When people finally add that up, the total interest they'll pay over the life of their debt, most of them are genuinely shocked, because they've been thinking about their debt in terms of balance and monthly payment, not in terms of total cost. Run the full number, not just what you owe right now, what you'll pay before it's done. But here's what's harder to put into a spreadsheet: debt doesn't just sit in the background quietly, it's present in decisions you don't even realize it's influencing. There's a kind of invisible calculation that happens constantly when you're carrying significant consumer debt before any meaningful decision, a job change, a move, a career risk, a period of lower income. There's a mental check: can I still cover the payments if this doesn't work out? That check happens fast. Sometimes it's so automatic you don't even notice it, but it shapes what you consider, what you pursue, and what you quietly rule out before you've even thought it through. A job opportunity with higher long-term upside but a lower starting salary, the debt makes that math riskier. Starting something on the side that would require a few months of slower income, the fixed obligations make that harder to justify. Taking unpaid time to deal with something important in your personal life, the payments don't pause. None of this is irrational, the calculation is real, the payments are real. But what's worth understanding is that debt doesn't just cost you money, it costs you options, and options, especially early in a career, are worth a lot. There's actual research on this. Studies have consistently shown that people carrying high levels of consumer debt show measurably elevated stress markers, higher cortisol, more disrupted sleep, worse cognitive performance on complex tasks. The brain treats unresolved financial obligation as an open threat, and managing an open threat, even subconsciously, uses mental resources that would otherwise go toward bigger thinking. You don't get that bandwidth back until the threat closes. So what actually happens when it does? The most immediate thing is cash flow. Suddenly you have money that isn't allocated. That sounds simple, and it is, but the psychological experience of it is different from what most people expect. It doesn't feel like abundance. At first it feels almost disorienting, because for years, your financial identity was organized around managing obligations, and now the obligations are gone. And there's this question of what you actually do with yourself financially when you're not in survival mode. This is a genuinely important moment, because the money will find somewhere to go. The question is whether you direct it or whether it just quietly disappears into a slightly more expensive version of your existing life. Most people who lose the gains from paying off debt don't lose them dramatically, they lose them gradually. A few subscription upgrades, a nicer apartment, a car that costs a bit more than the last one. Individually, none of those decisions feel significant. Collectively, they recreate the gap between income and savings. That the debt used to occupy this is lifestyle drift, and it's the single most common reason people pay off debt and still don't build wealth. The people who actually accelerate after paying off debt, who turn debt freedom into financial momentum, do one specific thing differently. They decide where the freed money goes before the last payment clears, not after. Before, because money without a destination gets spent. That's not a character flaw, that's just how it works. Here's the sequence that actually makes sense. In order: first, before anything ambitious, make sure you have a real emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of essential expenses in a liquid savings account, not invested, not tied up, accessible. This is the buffer that makes everything else possible, because it means one bad month doesn't send you back into debt to cover it. Once that's solid, the next move is capturing your employer's 401k match if you have one. This is genuinely free money, a guaranteed 50 to 100% return on those dollars before the market does anything. There is nothing else in personal finance that reliably beats it. If you're not getting the full match, you're leaving part of your salary on the table. After that, a Roth IRA if you're eligible. The contribution limit for 2025 is $7,000. Every dollar in there grows completely tax-free, not tax-deferred. Tax-free, you pay no taxes on the gains. Ever. For someone in their 30s or 40s with decades of growth ahead, that tax treatment is worth a lot. Then increase your 401k contributions beyond the match, up to the annual limit of $23,500 in 2025. Then a taxable brokerage account with low-cost index funds for anything left. That's the sequence. It's not complicated, it's just a hierarchy that makes sure every dollar goes to the highest value destination before moving to the next one. Now, I want to be honest about something, because this topic gets oversimplified a lot. Paying off debt is not a magic transformation. It doesn't automatically make you disciplined, financially sophisticated, or immune to the same patterns that created the debt in the first place. Some people pay off debt and rebuild it within 2 years. The behavior that drove the original debt, spending more than they earned, relying on credit to smooth over income gaps, not having an emergency fund so every unexpected expense went on a card. None of that changes just because the balance hit zero. The math changes, the habits don't change automatically, which means the real work isn't just the payoff, it's the identity shift underneath it, moving from someone who manages debt to someone who builds assets. Those are actually different financial identities, and making the transition consciously matters. What's your relationship with money when the urgency of the debt is gone? What does doing well financially mean to you now that you're not just trying to break even? These aren't abstract questions, the answers to them determine what you do with the freed cash flow. Here's the part that people don't expect. Beyond the money, beyond the monthly math, there's a clarity that comes after the last payment that's genuinely hard to describe until you've felt it. It's the absence of a background weight. Decisions feel lighter, risks feel more calculable. The future starts to feel like something you're building toward rather than something you're trying to not fall behind on. That shift in orientation, from defensive to generative, is probably the most underrated benefit of debt freedom, because it doesn't just change your finances, it changes the quality of the decisions you make about everything else. The lateral career move that pays off 3 years later, the time taken to develop a real skill instead of just grinding the current job, the ability to say no to the wrong opportunity because you're not desperate for income stability. These aren't financial wins in the obvious sense, but they compound to the question worth sitting with isn't really, should I pay off my debt? Of course you should. The question is, what are you going to do the day after? Because the payoff is the clearing. What you build in the cleared space, that's the actual story.